Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. The idea of privatizing St. Louis's airport continues to be under discussion at City Hall. The theory is that a private company could give the city a large cash payment up front in hopes of making money on the back end by streamlining operations. The cash influx would help a needy city. But what impact would a for-profit operator have on St. Louis Lambert International Airport? It's hard to say. Such a lease is virtually unprecedented. As president of the Board of Aldermen, Louis Reed is one of 3 members on the city's Board of Estimate and Apportionment, which must sign off on all city contracts. One member, Comptroller Darlene Green, is an outspoken no on privatization. A deal is only likely to advance if the board's second member, Mayor Lyda Cruson, is on board, so that makes Reed the likely swing vote. And in the immediate future, the Airport Working Group's agenda for tomorrow includes a possible vote on a request for qualifications for possible bidders. That means the privatization process could finally be moving forward, but it's up to 4 working group members, one of whom is Louis Reed's designee. That means there couldn't be a better time than today to discuss this issue with, yes, Louis Reed. So, Louis, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to talking to you about these important issues.
And for those of you listening, do you have questions or comments about airport privatization for President Reed? You can give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL on air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. And one note, we've invited all 3 members of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment to be on this show to discuss this specific issue. Comptroller Darlene Green was here a few weeks ago. Mayor Lyda Cruson is tentatively scheduled for October 10th. So, Louis Reed, for you, tomorrow the airport's working group agenda includes a potential vote on the request for qualifications for companies seeking to lease the airport. There's no public hearing scheduled. Are you okay with your designee voting to approve it tomorrow?
Absolutely. I'm okay with my designee voting to approve the RFQ. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand the process. We are still truly at the beginning of this process. When the former mayor, Francis Slay, filed his initial application, he filed it and laid out 2 options. One was to amend the charter through a referendum, and the second was to send it through its normal process,
through the Board of
Aldermen. And the first option would have given all the power to the mayor to bypass all the public discussion and everything else. So what happens in this process after we finish the RFQ, right? That's just a request for qualifications. So people will say, this is my financials, this is what I've done in the past, here's my resume, right? They will do that piece. What follows that would be an RFP process. And once we get through an RFP process, we truly have something to make a decision on. I mean, everyone that says they're for or against, they have no idea because there's like literally nothing in front of us to say what we can make a decision on, right? So once we get that information and get all of the data, then all of that information begins making its way through government. It has to first, it has to have FAA approval. It has to have approval by the majority of the airlines. Then it has to have approval of the Board of E&A and approval of the full Board of Aldermen. Now,
so there's a lot of steps here.
There are a lot of steps, and then here's the thing: once it makes it to the full Board of Aldermen, we will have public discussions and public hearings all over town about that, right? So before the final measure can move through the Board of Aldermen, it will have ample time for public discussion. So that's where the public engagement piece comes in. So, I'm happy that we're moving through this process opposed to moving through a process where a mayor sitting at their seat with a pen and paper can just make the decisions in a vacuum, right? The original contract, what I did with the original contract that was moving through the Board of E&A, I had added over 800 changes to that original contract to add transparency to it. This is why, the public even knows that there's a working group and truly that the working group has to take a vote. because under the original contract agreement,
that wasn't even part of that.
The working group didn't have to report out anything, and the working group did not have to take a vote. And public hearings and public discussion, none of that stuff existed.
So let's talk about a couple things that are in that contract that they might well have been things that you pushed to add. One of them says that there were supposed to be 2 staff people working on this deal that were underwritten by the working group. One of them was going to be at the St. Louis Development Corporation, and one of them was supposed to be housed at the Board of Aldermen. That is something that never happened. Do you know what happened there?
Yeah, it turns out that we did not need one. What we did was, if you take a look at my appointee is the finance director for the Board of Aldermen, right? Gerard. So Gerard, is PhD, right, in finance, and just extraordinary, right? So Gerard is our appointee to the working group, so he's getting all the information firsthand. He doesn't have to get it secondhand. He's there at the table.
So you felt like there was no need to have someone embedded within the Board of Aldermen?
No, we have the resources we need to make the decisions on it, because other than that, it would have been somebody that would have come under Gerard, that would have reported to Gerard, and that would have played both roles. After having those discussions, we knew it would be better just to put the most qualified person in place that would look at the nuts and bolts and numbers of the deal and be able to advise the entire board, right? So at any time, any member of the Board of Aldermen that has any questions about
they can talk to him.
Yeah, he knows more about what's going on with the nuts and bolts than me, you, or any of us, because he's there.
Or a dedicated liaison. Okay. Yes. The Board of Aldermen, they also passed this Resolution 222 sessions ago, and it called for the consultants to come before the Aldermen's Transportation Committee every 60 days. I understand that hasn't really been happening. What's the reason for that? Have you asked them to hit that?
The Transportation Committee chairman can choose to bring those people forward.
That's Alderwoman Davis.
Alderwoman Davis at any given time. But you remember in the original agreement, we also had a situation where the transportation chairman was not involved in the working group. And that was one of the changes that I made in the contract. I set up in the contract that the chairman of the Transportation Committee was part of the working group, so that person now is getting the information firsthand, and it's not something that has to be filtered through the consultants or anything. The other thing that we did was to break up that original consulting agreement, so that any one of the consultants, right, could report to and could have discussions directly with the Transportation Committee chairman, Gerard, and others about things that are happening within the working group. We also set it up so that we had other entities outside of the original working group and the original consulting groups that could report directly to the city their findings, right?
Okay. So there's a number of voices in there. One of the other changes, though, you mentioned all these changes you made to the contract. You did previously draw some criticism for holding up the vote just long enough to get some of your campaign donors added to the contract.
That is a complete falsehood.
Well, I mean, that's what the Business Journal reported.
And I had a discussion directly with the Business Journal. I had a discussion with the former editor of the Business Journal. I thought that was highly irresponsible. I mean,
they haven't retracted the story. Yeah.
Hopefully one day they will see their way clear to retract the story. I mean, just think about this on its face, Sarah. So the Business Journal contends that I wanted a specific law firm hired because 5 years earlier they had given me $1,000. You realize to run a mayoral campaign is like $750,000, $500,000, $750,000, right? I've put tens of thousands of my own dollars into my campaign. Nearly every law firm in the city of St. Louis has probably donated to one of my campaigns over time. So you tell me why I would go to Atlanta, Georgia, find a contributor that donated $1,000 to a campaign 5 years earlier.
You had much bigger donors you could have taken care of.
Yeah, when right here in the city of St. Louis, there are donors that have donated $50,000, $60,000 to me over time. So I went to Atlanta, Georgia to find it. You know why I chose Greenberg? I chose Greenberg because they are the foremost authority on municipal deals, large municipal deals like this, right? You find me a law firm that's more competent, capable, and qualified to address these issues and take a real solid look at this stuff than Greenberg. Greenberg is ranked one of the largest law firms, not just in the country, but around the globe, right? Greenberg also has more minority attorneys.
Mm-hmm. And I know that was one of your interests there. Yeah. Part of what they reported on, though, was also this guy, Bernard Bunny Charbonnet. And as the Business Journal detailed, he'd previously done some work for the city. It had exceeded the contract cap. The airport refused to pay what he'd invoiced, saying his firm had not even completed the entire scope of work. The company sought to file liens against the city. This seems like somebody we wouldn't want to bring back on this contract.
No, look. And they also ended that sentence with the very next sentence that says, "Who is black?" Right? And it's like, okay, why did that have to be in there? But Bernard Charbonnet understands the airport, right? If you take a look at the original consultants that were at the table, mm-hmm. right? Very few of them knew anything about our airport. Very few of them had any experience and understood some of the moving parts, our legislative branch, the community, none of that, right? Bernard Charbonnet was one of the most qualified people to be involved in this project, right? So
even with that history with the city, you wanted to get his voice.
Yeah, and by the way, the city was more than likely in the wrong on that deal, right? Not every position the city takes on these things are correct, right? For various different reasons, but sometimes you have a contractor and you have a director that they may not have meshed in the past for whatever reason, right? But I know that he has a stellar record all across the country and that he's done good work for the city of St. Louis.
So our phone lines are blowing up. We're also hearing from a lot of people on Twitter. We did get a tweet from Sean kind of speaking to something that you're just speaking to here. He says the airport is a major contractor of minority and women's business enterprise contractors in the region. Will a privatized airport be required to make the same good faith efforts?
Not just good faith efforts. We now have a minority and women-owned business inclusion law in place, as opposed to just an executive order. So that wouldn't change under privatization. That wouldn't change, and we would hopefully see all of that enhanced through it.
Okay. Let's go to the phone lines here. We've got Dan. He's calling, I believe, from Midtown St. Louis. Dan, hi. You're on St. Louis on the air.
Yeah, hey, just to do a quick fact check, the Charbonnet gave Louis Reed $10,000, and then he got $3,000 from Greer. So, from Greenberg. So let's just do a little fact checking there. The also thing is, we got to follow the money on this one. That's what the Business Journal reported. So, Rex Singfield, Better Together, Steve Stanger, Denver Airport Privatization. Okay, Reed takes donor money from outside of state places to give to privatize the airport. New Orleans, Atlanta. They're not St. Louis. Why is Louis Reed so reluctant to put this to a vote of the people of St. Louis?
I'll give that question to Louis Reed. Dan, you've certainly done your research on some of these details. Louis, what would you say to Dan's?
Well, I wouldn't say Dan has done research. I'd say Dan read the Business Journal. Two completely different things, right? And it's comfortable tying together these loose facts that the Business Journal kind of attempted to weave together. First and foremost, I'm reluctant to give the mayor sole authority on such an important issue.
And just to explain for our listeners, the mayor's contention is that if we put this to the vote of the people, the vote would technically authorize her to be the only yes or no vote. That's what she said. You feel like she's correct in her reading.
That's not what she said. That's what's in the application, mm-hmm. right? And that's the thing. It's important for people to get beyond just these superficial things. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. There's only one set of facts, right? And, it's clear in the application that former Mayor Slay put together. He put that in there as an option because he knew it would be tough to deal with the Board of Aldermen. And also, when you go through the Board of Aldermen, we have committee hearings, and there's public testimony through those committee hearings, right? Here's the other thing. When you look at what it took, what it would take to get that petition done, right? 15% of the registered voters, right? We have between 160 and 180,000 registered voters in the city, right? But truly, in an average election, 40,000 people show up?
Very low turnout.
Yeah. So, you don't have to get the active voters. You just have to go out and get, 15% of the registered voters. That's a pretty easy threshold. You can end up talking to people that are not engaged, that have no idea about the discussions that are being had. But when you send it through the Board of Aldermen, through committee hearings, you have engaged neighborhoods pushing their aldermen to go one way or the other and voicing their opinions, and then also showing up to committee hearings to voice their opinions directly at a committee hearing, right?
So you feel like that's actually more democratic to go that route?
It's more democratic, and not only more democratic, you get at the crux of it then, right? And you have a better opportunity to effectuate change in that manner.
I want to thank Dan for his call, but you did mention Mayor Francis Slay. Let's just bring this up. You had been quite a critic of many things in his administration. You ran against him for mayor. Does it alarm you that he went from starting the privatization process to now being a lobbyist for a company that might bid on it?
Yeah, very well. Yes and no, right? I think that when we look across these things, you find those stuff all the time. People are constantly resigning their office at the state capitol.
Then they go be a lobbyist.
Lobbying the people the next day. Now they're starting to put rules in place that call so that they have to sit out for a certain amount of time. St. Louis needs to have some rules in place, some laws in place that say, okay, if you have left office, you cannot lobby the city of St. Louis for whatever period. It could be 5-year period or whatever, right? So we need to up that, definitely from where it is today, and put more protections in place. I think that this is a perfect example.
We're talking to Louis Reed, who's the president of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. He's here taking our questions about airport privatization from both us and our listeners. In the meantime, though, I think there's just a real concern among some members of the public that everybody who's in power or was previously in power, referring to Mayor Slay, that they're just looking out for themselves and their own bottom line. Do you think that the public can have faith in this process at this point when you've got the very man who started it is now a lobbyist, which is such an anathema to. That obviously is an issue, right? But we need to look at whatever the deals are that may come in and the merits of the deal. And then we also have an opportunity when we get in committee and when we have the public hearings to bring those things out, if they even matter at that time, right? Mm-hmm. Because whoever former Mayor Slay is lobbying for may not even make the RFQ process, right? They may not even make the final bid, but who knows, right? So it's not an issue that I am concerned about today because it's not something that's not yet on the table.
It's not on the table. We're worrying about things, that are far off in the future that may not even have any bearing on today.
You mentioned the need for a revolving door law to stop this kind of thing from happening in the future. Would you introduce an ordinance, say, to stop that?
Absolutely. I think we should have that for sure.
Okay. Let's go back to the phone lines. Jim is calling from Bridgeton. Jim, hi. You're on St. Louis on the Air.
Yes, good afternoon. I have a question for Mr. Reed. Presumably, the city hopes to gain a rather large cash payment should they lease out the airport to a private management company. According to Ms. Green's call a few weeks ago, the airport is currently profitable. Why wouldn't the city do the same sort of streamlining and management improvements to increase the profitability of the airport and then keep all of the money for themselves? It would seem to be more in the long run than this one initial payment. And the other question is, what's the city going to do with this big big payment. There's been no mention of what these funds are going to be used for, as far as I'm aware.
President Reed, let's start first with why couldn't the city just do this kind of streamlining itself?
I don't know. Look at what's happening today. I think that's a perfect.
We like to argue in the city.
At some point in time, we have to deal with reality, right?
The city is not known for streamlining.
What is the airport doing now, right? Our big win last year, by the way, was what? WOW Airlines. It lasted for what, 6 months or something like that. Then WOW Airlines, now they're gone, right? All of these things we're talking about takes capital infusion. You tell me where the money's coming from. I don't know. I mean, it's just not there. We've hiked taxes as much as we can possibly hike taxes. I mean, we've leveraged everything. We have an aging infrastructure. By the way, not just in the city of St. Louis and each and every neighborhood across our city, but an aging infrastructure at the airport. So when we look at what's happening at the airport, we have a mountain of capital outlay that who knows where that's coming from in the future, right? So, before we can even look at, okay, how do we invest millions of dollars into making the runway to nowhere that was built by, former Mayor Vince Shamel that left us with $600 million in debt, right? So it's important for people to understand that we have $600 million in debt right now today on that airport. When you say that the airport is profitable, we get between $6 and $7 million a year back into our general fund.
And that's somewhat unusual that the city even gets that, though. I mean, that's a chunk of change.
Yeah.
But you're
Well,
saying
not really.
You're saying it could be a
not
lot
really.
more.
When we have $600 million in debt, that's not really a chunk of change, right? It will take us, 100 years to pay that off, right? So $6 million a year. When we have $600 million in debt, that is not math that favors the city, right? The other thing is, it's important for people to understand, people that live in the city understand that the airport resides in the county, right? Number one, airport funds are restricted funds. There are two, right? Which means that when you all were discussing the Denver airport, right? The Denver airport was a P3, right? And a P3 that fell apart because of bad concrete, essentially, in quick terms.
That was their sort of semi-privatization
deal.
Yeah,
semi-privatization, but they're completely two different things.
Different deal.
Because airport privatization was set up to allow municipalities to take airport funds, which are restricted funds, which can only be spent to better the airport, right? And get some of those funds to go to your general revenue so that you can use it to address infrastructure issues and whatever kind of issues across your city. You look at our city, you look at the number of abandoned buildings, you look at families that are suffering from.
Sorry, I'm sorry to say that. We are out of time here, and I want to apologize to all of our callers. We have a bunch more people that had questions for President Reed. Hopefully, we can have you back on again soon.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm free tomorrow.
So thank you, President Louis Reed, for joining us today. St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU. Thank you for listening. I'm Sarah Fenske.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.